And we are live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Bigfoot Odyssey's Researchers Reports. We have a great show for you tonight. I'm Kerry Arnold. With me, as always, producer and co-host of the report, Miss Daniela Aiello. How are you, Daniela?
I'm good, thank you.
Wonderful to see you. Looking lovely as always. Our guest for this evening, Mr. Paul Sinclair and Miss Joanna. I didn't get your last name, Joanna. I'm sorry.
It's Summerscales. It's
Summerscales from the ET newsroom. This is night number 10 of our 12 days of Christmas. 10 Lords Leaping, I think.
I think so.
They had a little bit of debate on that, but I could be wrong. I might be 10 Lords Leaping. I think it is. But yeah, I hope to have a good show for you guys tonight. All we ask you guys in the chat, keep it a little clean for us. We do appreciate that. It's Christmas time. Just be nice to each other. But Paul, it's great to see you again.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Great show with you the last time. Kind of interested to get into this the ET stuff. You know, we normally do Bigfoot stuff, and we know this is researchers report. You know, the reason we didn't call it Bigfoot researchers report because we wanted to have on all kind of researchers from every faction of the fringe, and because people, you know, are interested in it. I'm definitely interested in it, although I probably won't have as much to say tonight, and just looking forward to hear from what you and Joanna have to bring for us tonight. But let's kick it off. Let's kick it off with you, Paul. Tell us a little bit about before you were ever aware of any kind of extraterrestrial entity or anything you ever visioned. What were your thoughts and visions and views on this subject before then?
That's kind of hard to say before I were ever aware, to be honest, Kerry, because before I wrote the first book, Truth Proof, in 2016 it was published, it had always been a part of my life from as long as I can remember, from being, obviously a young child doesn't document any of this, 4 or 5 years old, it's been there. And I used to be afraid to talk about it, afraid to say these things because, well, the ridicule factor. But back in 2006, I was fortunate, Whitley Strieber took an interest in some of the things I were doing with the UFOs and the filming that I were trying to do on the East Yorkshire Wolds and places in the UK. But he got to know a few more bits about me and encouraged me to start talking about it. And I did on his show first time in 2014. So apart from my wife and my children, no one ever knew the things that have been happening to me from my earliest memories. And it's not fantasy. It's not wild imaginations. These aren't my stories. Haven't changed. I wish Joanna probably realizes this after she's spoken to so many people. But there isn't a night I do not go to bed, and this is the God's honest truth, trying to work through these little cameos of events that I've retained from childhood. And 1998, it seemed to stop for me. I'm 57 now. And there were a period where it stopped, I think, from about 16 to about 27. And then it started up again. I mean, I don't know why, but and you're working through them constantly. And it's an absolute mind mash. You can't because for one thing, Kerry, we're dealing with something whose existence is denied. And that's the massive difficulty. That's the wall that we are facing. The only place that I'm even reluctant to call it the alien abduction scenario because I don't know what they are that I encountered. But the only place that it's real is in here, in the actual witnesser's mind, and that's where it's real. And you've got to put your story across to people. I don't have to convince you guys, and hopefully the audience that are listening, because obviously they've got an avid interest, and some people will be listening because of the ET type connection, you know, and other things that we're talking about and things that you guys are talking about on the show. And I've probably gone off on a tangent here, guys, so I do apologize. But
no, well, you've got physical scars from this.
Good God, yeah. I told Whitley about him. I'm sorry to harp on about him, but I mean, he's come out with some things that have been really telling. So get your medical records, Paul. And it's incredible when you actually get the medical records and you've got little drawings that the doctors have done saying, put these punch hole lesions on. They called me a young man then. It was quite funny. Well, you know what I mean? You don't see it at time, but when you look back on it, we're sort of, they're sending them to skin experts. So what's the name for a skin expert, people? Yeah, whatever.
Dermatologist.
Yeah. Out of our area, out of Eastern North Yorkshire, to different people, because they couldn't understand what was causing the punch hole lesions on this young man's skin intermittently every 3 to 4 months. And I mean, they've healed with what's called giant foreign body cells, which implies a surgical procedure has taken place. Now, I'm not talking as some kind of expert on this, and one of you guys might know even better how to deal with what I'm talking about. But you know, when you've seen them, when they're at the side of your bed, and your bed's against a wall, and they're either side of your bed, and you're trying to process that, but you can't move because they can't be at the other side of your bed, but they are. So you're not there, but it's difficult. We don't even have the words to describe what we're seeing because it's that far off the table of what we're as human beings can conceive and what we know. It's just a complete mind wrecker. And I don't know. I mean, your guys are interviewing us, so but I'm keen to know or hear what Joanna might think of my experience or these experiences.
Well, one of the reasons that sorry, Kerry.
No, that's okay. Go right ahead.
I'm just kind of used to jumping in there. Do kind of stop me if you need to, guys.
We don't have
I was going to say one of the reasons that I'm doing what I'm doing, and the ET Newsroom had to change its name in 2015, 16 for reasons I won't go into now. I did tell Daniela before, but anyway, it started in 2011, and it was to provide a safe platform, unjudgmental, counseling ear to this whole process of speaking the truth that is yours. And I come from a background of health and wellness, as well as a bit of media and kind of a bit of a mixed bag, but I'm a regression therapist as well. And my interest has been way before the ET stuff and the UFO stuff, essentially was health and wellness and the spirituality and the consciousness element, without it being a religious aspect to whatever anybody else is going through. And back in 2016, I know the date, obviously we were working towards similar things, Paul. I also published a book, but it's called 44, and it's based on an ex-soldier's true story, an English guy's true story of lifelong encounters involving alien abduction, and the secret societies, the Masons in this regard, along with the Rosicrucians and many others, and the secret military governmental bodies. Now, this guy, Perry, you may not know the geography of the UK, but there's a place called the Black Country. It's near Birmingham, sort of West Midlands. And this guy, born in 1950, was as dyed-in-the-wool, black and white about everything as you could get. He would have thought we were all complete fruitcakes speaking this evening. He's not of that opinion now, because at 44 years old, he had what we would term, it's almost like a near-death experience. After a gig, he after a short stint in the army, he then became, after one or two other jobs as drivers and what have you, a working musician, a jobbing musician. And after one gig one night, he suddenly had this unbelievable download, which for somebody like Bill Brooks was, you said it's mind mash. Talk about mind mash. It kind of, you almost doubt your own sanity. And I've spoken to many people who have phoned me, because I also have a dedicated mobile number that anybody can ring in the UK and or anywhere, whatever, and speak confidentially if they want, or go further with it. And nearly everybody says, you're going to think I'm crazy. And normally, I tell you, honestly, I can count on, it may be two hands now, but it's not even the full two hands, over the years since 2011 I've been doing this, of the hoax calls. And they've always been drunk. And they've always been ridiculous. And there's no two ways that the other people who've spoken to me are hoaxing or trying to pull the wool over my eyes. The trauma and the PTSD kind of scenarios that go on with this are very, very real. And, Bill, when he contacted me, this guy whose story I wrote with him, actually, but I actually wrote it because he's dyslexic and has a lot of trouble with that sort of thing. when he was a kid, he couldn't actually read or write. He had no education. So he comes from a very interesting perspective because he had nothing of support that society normally gives you educationally and that kind of thing to even begin to address. And you talked about using the words, Paul. There are no words. We haven't developed language yet, vocabulary yet. We try our best, but it still falls a long way short. And that's where people think that, you know, you might have mental health problems. And listen, you may have mental health problems, and I don't mean you, Paul. I mean everybody as well, because Bill honestly thought that he was losing his mind. He said there were so many different scenarios that began to play out, and part of his coping mechanism was to hit the bottle for 2 years because he had nowhere to go with this. And in 2012, just to pick up from that date I said earlier, he'd had a week of heart attacks and strokes and thought, well, it's now or never. I really want to find somebody who can, you know, really hear my story and just give me some feedback, give me some validation as a human being about this. And, you know, this is really, you know, how can you not be compassionate? If you don't accept everything he says, I understand that. I didn't. You know, I'd go back to him and say, Bill, you didn't get that? And I may get it as a researcher coming in or a counselor stroke therapist coming in. And to me, it may be absolutely incredible how he could not have understood or seen something coming down the pipe. Because what we have to know as well, and this is crucial, I'm sure you'll agree, Paul, and everybody listening, is that the mind management of this kind of experience is profound. So whilst in the telling of the story and the retelling over 4 years that I went through with Bill to really understand if I was getting it understood, he just said, well, Joanne, I didn't see that coming. I just didn't know. And he was just honest. He just said, I can't tell you. And there were some things that really shocked me. I didn't think I was really shockable anymore, but really shocked me in his story. And I'm sure it's the same for you, Paul. And, you know, like, you know, Kerry said, let's be kind. Let's be kind every day. Let's not just make it Christmas. And let's not, you know, go and thump on people who are telling their stories. If it's not for you or you don't agree, just walk away. Just
that is a good attitude, and that is a good way to look at it. And with every genre within the paranormal field, I think we spoke about this before we came on air. But I might not agree with everything you say, Joanna or Diana.
Exactly, yeah.
But we can agree to disagree, because at the end of the discussion, we're dealing with other people's opinions, and I might bring something good to the table, just like you guys might, you know. But with these scenarios, with these visitations that I had, and I don't want to hog the conversation here because I'm sure you guys want to speak about something, but I never knew they'd actually been until they'd gone. I was aware of the situation. That might sound crazy. I was aware of the situation when it was happening, but even now, 1998, I think, what last serious one when I got the holes in my back, but I'm waiting every night. You're waiting. Oh, seriously, you're waiting. You that's probably why I get up at 4:30 in the morning. That's probably why I hear a tap and I'm awake. But you're never ready. It doesn't matter what you do, you're never ready. And it's like you're trapped in the moment. You're a rabbit caught in headlights, and you just can't do anything about it. And as I say, that's why I sort of use this. I weren't actually aware they'd been until they'd gone, because it's only then you can try and get these fragments of information. They don't come to you straight away. Sometimes they don't even come to me for weeks after, or they didn't do it. Something would trigger a memory, and then you've only got a tiny bit of it. You've only got like a small piece of the jigsaw. I'm praying that I get some kind of download and I'm going to remember. I've spoken to people and they've said, well, perhaps you don't want to remember. But believe me, with what I've seen, I want to remember. I want to know. Me personally, Joanna, I've never had anything good come from any of this. I know people do.
I think Bill, for example, might agree with you. And I'm just going to reference Bill today, although I've spoken to many people, and I'd like to reference one other before I continue with that, because his experiences are so profoundly varied and incredible. And, you know, when he had that download at age 44, being a man who was his very own man. I mean, this is a guy with an iron will, and you're not going to tell this guy to do anything. If he doesn't want to do it, he ain't doing it. And nothing I could say, and I might be the one to persuade him, but nothing I could say would persuade him otherwise. And so that mentality, when it's broken open, is profoundly disabling. And I really mean that. This guy, when this happened, and you're talking, it's very interesting that what you said there, Paul, because when 44 years of abduction and encounter and all the rest of that fell into his consciousness and awareness from when he was about 2 or 3 years old, that seems to be when we gather it is, 1951, 52, 53, something like that. He said it was so vast, so huge, it split him so completely that he was in danger of losing his mind. And the drink helped him kind of null, if you like, some of it. He did come out of that. But then he said it was almost as if I remembered there was one major abduction that he had in about, I think it was 84. I don't think we'll get time to talk about that. It was incredible. But he had a huge amount of memory on it, recall. He hasn't had any regression or anything like that. But the other memories, of which he has a lot of recall, but not necessarily of the whole event, maybe like you, Paul, he says he's aware of it, and then suddenly it's gone, and then it drops back in. And it's almost like a safety mechanism. So over so 2012, so let's take it sort of back 18 years from then. So when he contacted me in 2012, it was about 18 years since he'd had the download. Up from that time, it had been those years of distilling it, of it coming like drip, 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 drip into his consciousness, distilling it into a better understanding of what all these different ones were from childhood. And you know, like his brother, he'd got a severely disabled brother, physically disabled, not mentally disabled. As now and again, they would share rooms as kids. And his brother, when he came out of the army, his brother would try and show him pictures, go to the library and get books. And Bill was he thought his brother had gone mentally ill. I went, really? I mean, he said, yeah, I just thought the illness had traveled up from his physical. I said, are you honestly? And because he was so locked out, he could not countenance, honest to God. I mean, he was his head, it was like you wanted to knock it. Because it was too much. He wasn't able to accept it. And even when his brother died, which was 6 months before he had the download, imagine what a trip this was. Bill was by his deathbed and his brother raged at him and said, you're one of them. This is all part of what you're part of. And he pulled back the covers. And what had happened for this guy, he had been born with a lot of the organs outside the body. And so anyway, very difficult in those earlier days as well. But he believed that he clearly had been some kind of experiment. Whether that's true or not, Bill didn't know what he was talking about. Bill thought he completely lost it, and the brother just chucked him out. Security had to make him leave because.
Does he have feelings of guilt now?
He did a bit because, well, the thing is, and I said, but you can't, because you were locked out at that point to the memory, so you cannot feel guilt. You cannot. This is, you have no way of addressing that because the compartmentalization that we hear so much about in terms of mind control and other things. It's definitely true in the alien abduction scenario as well. And, just picking up on if you don't mind, on a side note, last year I produced an album called Eclectia. And Eclectia is eclectic by nature because it features guys and girls who have had experiences. They're all musicians, and most of them are. And one of the guys, Daniel Vallely, who is a musician, singer-songwriter who's featured on the album, also did the artwork for it. Anyway, one of the things, he used to live down south near me before he moved back up to Scotland. And he was telling me in the early days when I knew him, which was about 5 years ago, that he'd had a stroke in his late 40s. I said, my gosh, very young, eh? And he was up in Glasgow And he was up there in a hospital for a week. Now, this is relevant when I tell you that one evening, I think it was in the early hours of the morning, he just went to the nurse's station and said, look, guys, have I had a stroke? He actually told me that nobody during the week had been to see him except somebody had taken a brain scan when he was first brought in. And a nurse stepped aside as the doctor popped out and said, oh, yes, you have, Mr. Vallely. But what we're really interested, and interesting the language she used, she said, but what we're really interested is the artifact in your brain. Now, normally in a hospital, I would expect them to say foreign body or, you know, a bit more of a technical term, but an artifact, like an ancient archaeological find, is something else. And anyway, I got him to get his scans, and he did. And you can see it on the Eclectia website gallery page. It's on there for everybody to see. And you can see a really big implant, and it's about that big. Where am I? About that big. It's quite long. And it's astonishing. I mean, he can never have that removed. And it absolutely sent, you know, he had no idea about this and doesn't know the effect of it. But when he went back into his room, he thought, okay, guys, if this is anything to do with you, meaning ET, you know, show yourselves kind of thing. And from the hospital window, he saw at least one craft go past.
Excellent.
So what that all is, I don't know. But this is, you know, this is one of the things that I'm interested in doing as well, is finding different pathways to share, for people to share this information, artists, musicians, that kind of thing. So it is amazing, Paul. I mean, you know, all that you've said is all that is a lot of what I've heard as well. And
I'm sure you will have done, because you've spoken to so many people, and I'm sure, even though it's not quite your area of research, perhaps, Kerry, it's nevertheless intriguing, isn't it? You know, the things that happen.
I can tell you, and we appear to be getting just a little bit of squelch coming from your side there, Joanna. I don't know if your volume is up a bit high.
Is it? Let me turn it down.
It's not major. It's minor, but it's a little noticeable. No,
Is that any better?
If I can just
I've turned my volume right down. Let me just see if it's on the. Let me.
That's better. There's a bit of feedback, weren't there?
That's actually better. That's actually
right.
better.
Let me just turn it down on the computer a bit more as well. So I've turned it down on 2 points now.
Oh, that's actually much better. It would just
sorry, guys. I'm really sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. Look, if it would have been, if what you're saying wasn't interesting, I'd have stopped you a long time ago. But I was just into it. But you know, stepping back just a little bit, kind of getting a collective, a 30,000-foot view here, and what appears to be happening, not just with this subject, but with a lot of the fringe subject. You know, there's appears to be this age of enlightenment, and which has been prophesized, you know, by the Mayan Indians. The end of the Mayan calendar, 2012, which everybody thought was the end of the world, was actually the end of an age, in the beginning of a new age, the age of enlightenment. And what I can tell you, what's going on right here in the United States, I'm watching the news, you know, Tucker Carlson, and he's got this general on here where they're talking about these craft that the Navy has been after for years. They just show up, and then, you know, they can only see them on infrared. You can't see them with your eyes. You can't see them with FLIR, but you can see them with their third generation military infrared, and they're following these craft, and they're doing things that are so far outside the norm. And actually, the United States was suspicious. Obviously, they're suspicious of everybody, that it was either Russia or China. But once they got the intelligence on it, the Russians and the Chinese have actually lost military aircraft going after these things, but they were engaging them. They were trying to shoot them down, and these things just dispatched them, you know, with ease. So it appears to me that not only, like I said, not just with this subject, but Bigfoot and the paranormal stuff and UFO, it all seems to be coming to a head and coming to a surface. And I just wonder if that, what do you think about that, Joanna? Do you see those correlations going on there?
Yeah, I do, and with the Bigfoot Sasquatch side as well, I've been listening to quite a lot of material over the last 2 years, and really just getting a bit more au fait with it, because I'm fascinated by it, and I'm very interested to to hear about this dimensionality element. And I think that has a bearing on what you're pointing out there, Kerry, because can't remember, Daniela, if I was saying to you earlier, I'm not sure if it was Bashar or somebody of that ilk was saying that now we will start seeing not exactly a conversion, maybe not convergence, but also maybe a divergence of lines where there is no simpatico, no mindset, no similar mindset, that those will go off on one route and the others on another, and so on, and there will be myriad. And it seems to be that there is this strange, maybe this is this time coming now where like minds are going to have more resonance together, because there seems to be something going on about this dimensionality, that's for sure. And it's coming in, closer, and not seeing things except for the infrared. It's really, really interesting stuff, that. And seeing that Bigfoot reports have suddenly they're there and they're not there, that kind of thing as well. And the same with some of the dogman stuff. I was speaking to a lady in the UK who'd had a profound dogman or werewolf encounter. It sounds absolutely so far out of left field that you think, what the heck? But this lady, who may be in her, I'm just trying to gauge, maybe early 60s now, when she was 13, this event happened to her in an area not far from London called Essex, where she was, she's a tiny little lady as well now, and she was just on her way to a friend's, stay overnight, and crossing a field, nothing terrible or sinister about that, but she suddenly became aware of something being so close to her she could feel its breath on the back of her, and when she and there had been no one there, and when she turned around she saw this incredible creature, and she said, I sound crazy when I'm saying it. She said, I know how it sounds. But she said it was bipedal, and it was huge like a wolf, and it looked like it had a live feed, but she didn't see anything around from where it might have had a live feed from, because it had matter in its mouth and blood. All sounds very dramatic. But she said the weirdest thing is, well, one of the weirdest things is that she said, the Incredible Hulk? I went, yeah. She said, well, believe it or not, it had burst clothes on like that. Wow. So that made me wonder also if that wasn't part of a program, a secret program, where we all, the military and whoever else, are already involved in this, DNA switching out, switching up kind of thing, and also very well of the dimensionality kind of things. So it's come off a track a bit, Kerry, to say the least.
It's a good aspect what you've just put about the clothing. I mean, I'm not so sure. Sorry for butting in here, but I'm not so sure about the transformation side of it. But who's to say that this lady ain't telling the truth? She may well be. There's a place close to us now, because I've done loads of research. I don't know if we touched on it last year, on the Flixton werewolf. I've written about it extensively over the years. Probably Britain's oldest it is got to be Britain's oldest werewolf report, the accounts of the Flixton werewolf. And there's a place very close to Flixton, 2 miles away, called Fordon. There's a tiny village. There's probably only about 8 properties in Fordon, and there's a guy been contacting me. There's a very small church at Fordon, and he pulled up with his wife in the darkness, again, the church. And this is only a few months ago, and he's seen it twice now. He's consciously been out with his wife to see if they can see it again. They became aware that there was something near the car. They moved the car over, reversed the car and put the lights on, and he's called it the Fangman. He says it was an upright, bipedal being. He says, I don't want to call it quite like a dog. He said, but the interesting thing, and what Joanna touched on there, he said it had some kind of footwear on. Now, you think to yourself, good God, if this isn't crazy enough, we're talking about these things here in the UK, because as a researcher, I never thought I would look into the subject of Bigfoot, werewolf type reports, but I'm getting them from people all over the UK with no connection to each other. So that I think there's a truth and there's some reality to this. Whether there is a transformation, I don't know. I don't tend to lean to that. The interdimensional aspect, because I don't think we've got the landmass here in the UK to support what would be an apex carnivore. Well, I would assume it's a meat-eating creature and not herbivore, omnivore. But anyway, but yeah, this guy said it had footwear on. Now, if he wanted to just tell me this story about seeing a perceived werewolf, and for most people, the story would end as soon as he said it had footwear on. But the guy's giving me some kind of truth here. I mean, I want to let other people speak, but February the 7th this year, on the top of Bempton Cliffs, which is the place where I do a lot of research because it's a multi-phenomena area where lots of things are seen, the cat sightings, the UFOs, there's missing people up there. I would never say that the cats or the UFOs are responsible for the missing people, by the way, but I would say that they're going missing in an area of high strangeness. However, February the 7th this year, 2 ex-paratroopers on the cliff tops at Bempton. They'd gone wild camping. Their goal was to see, there's 2 pairs of peregrines up at Bempton, and they wanted to see these birds fly early morning. They took 2 dogs with them, a Patterdale, Staffordshire Bull Terrier cross and another terrier. And they're on the cliff tops, they're walking. Now, this is something I think particularly all of you might agree with. He said everything felt off. Because I've spoke to Rob, he's allowed me to record him. We played it in the Bringing Down the Light documentary that I did with Chris Turner. He said the air felt electric. He said I couldn't understand it. He said the actual feelings that we got, everything bristling on my neck and on my arms. He said it was strange to start with. He says, and we were walking at 3 a.m. We took us dogs and we had a lamp. He said, and we lit a pair of yellow eyes up like golf balls. He said, and we thought with the few swear words, says we carried on walking. He said, and I'm rushing the story because I don't want to take everybody's time up here. But he said we got to a viewing platform because it's a bird reserve, remember, that looks out to sea. So there's a gannet colony. He said, and we spent a few minutes there, and then we carried on walking, and we walked through what he perceived as 2 gate posts without a gate. I mean, I can see this location right now. And as he went through the gate, it's put the torch on. He said, and it's there. He said, and I thought it was a hyena at first. It was hunkered down, the back bristling, and then it stood up. It stood up on 2 legs. And this haunting him. I speak to this guy, and I don't say this lightly, every day. We message each other or speak. He lives in Liverpool, so it's a good distance away from me. It's absolutely wrecked his head. He said, I've patrolled the streets of Bogside in Northern Ireland. I've been to Iraq. I've faced life and death situations. But this thing that I saw at Bempton were dragged from hell. Just another amazing.
How tall was it? What were
he estimated it to be about 7 foot tall. Interestingly, he said it had thin arms. He said it had huge broad shoulders, but thin arms that looked longer than they should have been. And it stepped towards him. And the thing that haunts him is, he said it lifted its arm up under its chest and was doing that with its finger, but not to him. He said, I looked at my mate. He said, and he'd froze. Literally, absolutely froze. He said, in fear. He said, but I sort of knocked him. He says, and we backed off and went. And he says, we packed his gear up and we just left. We've not been.
Sorry, Paul, was that a beckoning gesture that you were looking? No, was that?
Yes, yeah, oh yes, the beckoning gesture.
I didn't quite see it. Sorry.
Not towards them, to the side.
Oh, okay. All right.
Loads of finger movements.
Well, hey, look, what's to me as important as the sighting is the electricity, because I felt that. I have felt that in the woods recently, just this year.
Really?
For the first time in my life. The only way you can explain it is it's electrical. And I was with people, Native American tribe, Omaha Indians, that talk about Dogman. And Dogman being the type of protector that protects the path. And, someone else suggested this, and no doubt our government, the United States, has done some genetic stuff. You can't. Look, when they cloned the sheep in the 90s, you just knew that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
And that we weren't going to know exactly what they've done, and who knows what they've done. But what kind of correlation could it be that Dogman and people are seeing this thing? Too many people are seeing this creature. And someone suggested that Dogman was created to hunt Sasquatch and other cryptids. But created by who? They suggested it was created by ETs. That ETs, that was the only way they could catch this creature was to create this other creature. And if you look back, ancient Maya and ancient Egypt, they have the Nubis. They have the forming of this man body with a dog head. And then, I mean, how many thousands of correlations can you make between the ancient Egyptians and people from outer space? I mean, that's to me, it's just interesting. But you know, that's why I say the important.
It is interesting. But you know, you've got cultures all over the world that have got dog type god deities. I mean, is it the Maya? Is it Zoltol, the dog god? And like you just said, Anubis. And there's too many correlations for there not to be some kind of truth to this.
Yeah,
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I
totally agree. Yeah, I mean, and just to finish off with the lady who saw this Dogman, for want of a better term, her terror was absolute, and she seemed to remember, if I remember her story correctly, is that there was a little bridge over like a little stream or something, and her friend's place was beyond that, not very far. And she just knew she had to get there, or she felt her life was in danger. Whether it was or not, I don't know, but that's what she felt. And she was so terrified. She said she was aware of some kind of white light, and then she managed to get to her friends and didn't see this being again. But imagine being so tiny and so young and having this thing so over you that you can feel its breath, smell it, see it, you know, in great detail. And she was so traumatized by this, and still is, that she was actually hospitalized because she you know, it kind of was breaking her mind, and she had to be sedated. She was a nervous wreck for a very long time and wouldn't ever go back there. And when I asked her if she would interview with me, I was explaining earlier on that to Daniela that she's not very well. She has some very, very severe health conditions, and it may be that I never do get to interview her. But and I said I would, because I always like to go out in the field and be in the place where things have happened, if possible. And I said I wanted to do that and go to that place, and it absolutely terrified her. She said I could not. She said I don't even want to speak about it again because I feel it might draw it to me. And she's a real sensitive, medium, mystic kind of person, very switched on, very intelligent, not anybody, you know, because she told me the story, and I will say this as well, because I knew her a little while before. She was at my very first AMMACH meeting when I was introducing it, and she shared some of her story. She had never told that story to anybody in her life before she was in her late 50s. I mean, and I think the courage, guys, it takes, you know, we must respect people. It doesn't matter if we don't agree, but respect that courage it takes. And I'm not talking about the idiots out there. You know, I'm not talking about those people. I'm just saying it is really a stretch. I have really been stretched myself in where, you know, like Bill's story, one of the reasons I stayed with it to the bitter end, to the writing of it, was because he needed so much support, and had, you know, he said, when I had my thing, like you're saying, Paul, it wasn't love and light and angels. It wasn't at all that. It was fairly stressful, to say the least, very, very challenging. And he, you know, he said, I did go to one group, which was mainly ladies, and they were all full of love and light and angels. And he said, when I tried to tell them anything of my story, which was not that, they rejected it. And he had nowhere to go with it. So
it is really, you know, because the ladies who we were speaking to, they could have been just as genuine, but they weren't willing.
Oh, I'm not disrespecting the ladies.
No, I know you're not. I'm just.
It was out of their frame of reference, and this is what I mean. It's out of our frame of reference most of the time. I mean, I haven't had those experiences, but since I've started, again, I was telling Danielle earlier, since I started doing this work, I wouldn't call myself an experience, but maybe now I would, in some way or another.
Yeah. Do you know, it's so, everything's difficult. Every aspect of if the abduction scenario is difficult. I don't find it difficult now to say that I wet the bed till I was 13 years old, but actually out and saying that on Whitley's show, and I felt sort of ashamed. And
you're not the only one.
And I wouldn't leave the room on a night, even though they visited. Everything that happened took place in the bedroom, but I wouldn't leave the bedroom on a night. I was terrified. I would bunch all the covers up into the tightest ball and if I could have climbed in wall, I would have done, and leave a little gap to look. And you're never aware. I'd say you're never aware that they're there till they've gone. It's just the craziest situation. I mean, and now I don't know whether I've got braver. I don't think I have, but now I'm sort of older, and I've died. I throw all these thoughts around like a cement mixer in my head, and I'm waiting all the time. I've done my wife's head in. She's in other room. I've got a CCTV camera in bedroom. It's just, and I'm never going to catch them. Everything. They're not just one step ahead. They're another level ahead of us. And like we've said, and I'm just sort of repeating myself, that we just can't conceive the things that are happening. My problem is, like you've just touched on, Joanna, is finding the words to describe the experiences. And we're trying to convince people that these things exist, and they're denied by society. You know, I'm documenting the lights seen off Flamborough Head and Bempton. These, what I've termed in my first website, the intelligent light forms. And I think somebody touched. Oh, well, you, Joanna, you just said the lady saw a light. She can't recall what the light was during her sighting of the werewolf. And these lights seem to crop up quite a lot. Yeah. But we've got lifeboat logs and Coast Guard logs here in the UK that have got very detailed, documented accounts of people seeing these lights off the coast, and sent multiple lifeboats from all areas coming out to search for boats in distress or planes in distress, and nothing's found. And you get, at the end of the report, false alarm with good intent. I mean, I got one just this week, Maritime Coast Guard Agency, and it's thick about the strange lights seen off the coast. A guy contacted me, so I put a Freedom of Information request in, and the Coast Guard checked everything: aircraft activity, military exercises, went out and investigated. Nothing was found. So the end of the report, it says false alarm with good intent, and it goes back decades. So either all these people are lying, or we've got a genuine phenomena here documented on paper in logs, and the lifeboat people aren't. And Maritime Coast Guard Agency are not trying to deceive anyone, but they haven't got words to describe what people are seeing. It's denied an existence. So they have to put something like false alarm with good intent. That's crazy.
But you see, I mean, who knows about that, Paul, either? I mean, you know, all of this stuff. I mean, gosh, I mean, it's so important. This is part of everyday life. This is what's happening. And it's normal that these things are happening, although they're paranormal in effect. Yeah. You know, and the dimensionality thing, that is getting more and more up front in our awareness, I think. And the consciousness element too is huge, because I don't know about you, Paul. Well, I can take a good guess that, like Bill, or maybe not like Bill, but Bill, for example, was completely locked out to anything to do with, you know, personal development, spirituality, this kind of thing. But he was a man of nature. He had that kind of, you know, thing where animals would come to him and love him. Yeah. So you know that there is a spirit in him, something of nature that is very strong. Still don't know why he was signaled, you know, or singled out in his life, even from childhood. Very interesting. That's something I would love to explore more, and I don't have a handle on that at all. Because it involved the Americans, and I don't know what it was they knew about him. This little guy from the West Country, the Black Country in the UK. What did they know about him at 9 years old, 5 years old?
Well, do you think it's mapped out for us well in advance? And they, like in 1998, it stopped for me. Do you think this were meant to happen to Bill?
Yes.
At the age of 44?
No.
And if there was some interaction with governments, with another intelligence, I'm so reluctant to call them aliens because I don't particularly think they're from some star system. I do think it's interdimensional. I think it's as easy as we're on Radio 1 and they're on Radio 2.
Exactly, and it also could be another planet.
Let's not rule it. I'm not ruling it out. I'm just saying that.
I hear you. Yeah.
Because people will say, "Oh, how can they travel all those millions of light years?" And I'm saying, well, they're not traveling millions of light years because if I've seen these things, they're already here.
Yeah.
Can I go back to something you said before about the artists, the music, the album that you made.
Right.
Contactees are artists. Are you noticing that there's something? Because we talk about in the Bigfoot kind of thing with the people I'm talking to, is that there seems to be a connection with creative people. Are you finding that, Joanna, that creative people seem to be the target? Sorry,
I'm hearing a bit of feedback again. I'm just turning the sound down. Otherwise I can't hear you. I'll try again. Yeah, you know what? Isn't it interesting how things come of a time, because Grant Cameron had been talking about this kind of thing, and I've got a list which I wrote out of, it's a bucket list, a wish list of projects and media projects that I want to develop and have started developing. And I'm starting on a new foot in the new year, developing with an American colleague. And one of them was an album, because I knew from speaking to people, so many people were musicians. And as I researched it, I'd spoken to Grant on my radio show. I'm hearing a bit back. I'm trying to turn that down a bit. I knew that there was a music link, not that he was musical, but that he'd become aware with people like Merrill Fankhauser, sort of the surf rock guy out in California, who's on the album, who had some incredible experiences around music and paranormal events. Very, very interesting. And as Grant was writing his book, Tuned In, The Paranormal World of Music, I had begun work. I don't think I'd begun work. I only began work on the album last year and finished it last year. So, but it had been in my mind for the same sort of time. And it's almost like those who are kind of, throwing that fishing line out there of consciousness and awareness into the pool of life with our strands of particular interest are drawing to us again. It's like a conglomerate of that strata of experience. And so this is quite new, because there's never been anything like a collectia done before. This is a world first, and it's really exciting. And why is it a world first? Because musicians make albums all the time. Well, they do, but what I've got is a soundbite from most of the guys talking about their event or their profound event, or whatever that was. And then there's some research that I've done with some dowsing folks who are using dowsing to find evidence of ET in ancient archaeology and current cosmic events. Absolutely stunningly fascinating, which is another area of work that I'm just opening up. It just blows my mind. And also people like Grant, and there's a guy called Chris Bledsoe who's had huge events in his life. And one of the things that happened was he doesn't know ET, but ET's introduced this lady to him and said that he had a message for Grant, which she had a message for Grant, which was, the message is in the music. I mean, my goodness me, And then from the research I've done, there's a fantastic book called Alien Rock by a guy called Michael Luckman, who's sadly no longer with us. And that just blew me away with what these well-known groups, mostly well-known, every household names, have experienced. I mean, it is just mind-blowing. And you know, and what do most humans love, especially young humans, is music, music, music. And I think this is another pathway in to help with support the awareness, raising awareness, education, I think, and yeah, showing a different facet to the experiencer angle. So it's very interesting. But the creative thing, it goes across the arts. And also, just mentioning Chris Bledsoe again, who had his experience back in 2007 from being a fundamentalist Carolinas kind of society, was not expecting anything like this, but he's now painting, he's now writing. And what's interesting is that I'm not a hunter kind of person in terms of killing animals or killing anything if I can help it, but he was a hunter. And one of the greatest accolades that he had was killing one of the largest bears in the area. And he tells the story against himself, because he says now, after the experiences he's had with ET, he spent 5 years in trauma and desperation and psychological darkness and pain before coming out into the consciousness, working through, changing. I mean, what a massive turnaround in the mind, and the ability to assimilate that into life. And he said he could no more hurt anything now than, you know, maybe fly to the moon, I might say. But he now puts little videos of him, you know, look at raising little ducklings and stuff like that. And so this creative strand, this part of our DNA gets switched on, which may have a dimensionality aspect. And I don't know, Kerry, if this picks up on anything that you feel, but so part of the music thing and part of the inspiration thing is when something just suddenly drops in, like Mozart, you know, would have this, but the whole music thing drop in. And Mike Oram said the same thing, who's on the album, and he has had some absolutely off the charts experiences all his life. I mean, we're so privileged to be around all you guys. Thank you, Paul, for sharing your story, because, oh my God, you know, you're giving us such a fantastic education, and all you lot for sharing everything you're doing. It's fabulous. And we should flag this up as a great privilege to, you know, have you guys in our sphere.
Well, we're privileged, and what you're talking about, Joanna, we have what they call idiot savants. But, you know, these things happen to people.
I know what you mean.
Fall and hit their head, and then there's this lightning strike, and all of a sudden they can sit down and compose, you know, Mozart, and it just comes to them. What I wanted to get into before we finish the show, Paul, if you don't mind, talk to us a little bit about your experiences with these beings, if you don't mind. If it bothers you, I understand. What remember happening to you?
Well, the cameos of events that I've retained, Kerry, and I've tried to put them in order. I'm writing a book at the moment. It'll be 5th one, called The Night People. But anyway, it'll not be out yet, so I'm not trying to push a book at this present time. So I've tried to do it in order as I can remember. But remember, as a small child, you don't keep a diary of what's happening. But with limited life experiences, as a little boy, we lived in, I've told this story before, we lived in this a council house with in a tiny village called Old Dennerby, and it overlooked pasture with cows in the fields and everything, and I could see the town of Mexborough in the distance and all the street lights of Mexborough. And I don't know whether what I saw with my dad were a catalyst to what followed. I sort of always suspected it might have been, but he woke me up one night. Or I don't know, it could have been 7 o'clock, but he woke me up. It was dark. I'd gone to bed. They were real sort of strict, hard kind of guy, my dad. So for him to wake me up, it had been unusual. And we'd got the cooling towers of the power station at Mexborough to the right, and as I say, all the street lights. And near the cooling towers was an object that to my young eyes looked like the moon. It was a lemony white colour, and it seemed to be turning, swirling. It was strange. It was stationary, and then it set off moving, and it looked like it was just above the rooftops, but it was very big. And my dad's sort of discussing with me. I can remember him. He'd got some binoculars on it, and he let me look through them. And he said he thought it was a weather balloon. And it took ages, and it went all the way along rooftops of Mexborough. And when he got about halfway, he left me, and I sat in the bedroom watching this thing, and it disappeared through Mexborough and down towards another little town called Swinton. And that was that. I'm assuming I was 5 years old, 5 or 6. I just don't know. But after that, it happened. It's crazy. Cattle in the back of the field. Now they play into this story. If I have time to just tell you what happened. My mum. I don't know if anyone remembers fiberglass curtains. They were cheap and horrible and bright. I was talking to Howard Hughes about them the other day. Howard remembers. But anyway, my mum had furnished all our windows with fiberglass curtains. Have I time to tell this?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I'm laid in bed and I'm awake. I don't know why I'm awake, but I'm awake and I'm looking around the room. That's another strange aspect, that you can see, it's dark and you shouldn't be able to see in the room. But anyway, I'm looking at the curtains and I realize I can see eyes. And these curtains are a blue-grey colour. And I realize I can see eyes in curtains, and they're huge eyes. And I'm thinking the cow's eyes, because as a small child, that is the only thing that I've got a point of reference for something that big. And I'm looking, and then they came out of the curtains, and we call them aliens, call them what you like, Kerry. They were there, and from that moment, then the memory becomes disjointed, and I've got memories of laying there, crying, screaming, but not making a noise. And what's difficult, I wanted to speak about it earlier when Joanna said something, but it's almost like they put a firewall up in your mind. Because even now I can see all these disjointed memories of each event, but put them together, I can't. It's so hard. I can't get them to flow. As soon as you start thinking of one and the other one, there's a gap, but the other one follows it, but you can't think of them in any continuity. Writing Night People has helped. So that's one cameo of events. 1998, I think the last one, and I received 3 holes in my back, and 2 of them were really big. I mean, the medical notes just say, does this man have a history of trauma? The doctor said it looks like a bullet wound, and these weren't little holes. And they've healed, 2 of them have healed with big scars because we had a biopsy done on them, and that's where they come up with the giant foreign body cells and the sort of surgical procedures that had been done. But I woke up in the bedroom above where I'm sat now, and Mary must have been in bed, my wife, and they're telling me there's a bed. They're telling me there's a bed spring turning in my back, now, which is ridiculous because they're there outside of bed, or they're there in the room, but they're telling me not just to disregard everything, if that makes sense, because there's a bed spring turning in my back, and I could feel it. It were horrible. It were inside my body. I don't know what it was, but I was being told it were a bed spring. And I woke up the next morning. I don't wear clothes in bed, so I sat outside of bed. And Mary says to me, "I don't believe it, Paul." I forgot about it. I completely forgot when I woke up. It'd gone from my head. And I said, "What's the matter?" She says, "You've got 3 holes in your back." And suddenly, I started to put it together. I started to remember. And another interesting thing, I don't know if anybody's touched on this, but there were ash on my back as well. Mary, I couldn't see it. Mary saw it. There was ash, actual traces, as though something had gone from one to another. There was ash on my back. So anyway, I went to the doctors with that one. We had the biopsy, and then, I don't know, 2006, I got talking to Whitley indirectly, because he were interested in the light forms that I'd been posting all over internet. And then we find this sort of trail of paperwork where doctors had been discussing these punch-hole lesions, and quite perplexed were the words and all sorts. I think the parting comments are, "We'll have to draw a blank with Mr. Sinclair's lesions." And loads of little cameos of events like that, to be honest, Kerry, and I don't know how far you want to go with it.
Well, no, I mean, we're coming to the end of our hour. I'm sorry, Danielle, go ahead.
I've just got one more. Chris is just asking to ask you about Christmas 1970.
Oh, Chris. Yeah, Chris was going to be on, and he was having some issues.
Chris is
Yeah,
in.
the 1970 coming back from Dale and Brown's club, sports club with my mum and dad in the early hours. I don't know whether I'm sure it was New Year's Eve, but it's difficult. If this is it's got to be this one. And as we're walking back, it's crazy. There's the canal, there's the River Don, and you come over these bridges. So I'm going a bit long-winded here, going over this, but we saw a rabbit, a guinea pig. I'm not sure if there were 2 guinea pigs, but there were a rabbit and a guinea pig, and it was snowing. They were icy, it was bristling, and we'd come over the crossings, and we lived in a little village, and there's nobody about. It's early hours at morning, and I'm looking at these, and I want them. I'm a little boy. I want. They were pets. They weren't wild. And carried on walking, and my mum says, "Can you see them, Bob?" My dad was called Robert. Bob, that's what. And he went, "Keep going, keep going." And I'm wanting these things. I've got a rabbit at home. I want to put him in a cage. And she's dragging me by the arm, and she's saying, "Bob, I'm frightened. Can you see him?" And he's going, "Keep going, just keep going." And now my dad weren't a man who feared much. Honestly, he would just not. He wouldn't cause an argument, but he would. If there were an argument, he wouldn't back away from it, and he was frightened. And I looked back, and in the field, so we're walking down what's called Ferryboat Lane, and in the field to the left-hand side, they looked like cardboard, to be honest with you, but they were stood back, and it were all frozen, the land, and it was a clear night, and there were 2 tall, naked figures, and they were grey, and they were, and I saw them, and we just carried on going up the lane, and I think that's what I don't perceive anything happening to us, but that's just one memory of seeing him. And a guy called, an unusual name, and I keep saying I'm going to look him up. I doubt if he'll ever listen to this. They call him Hugh Simpson, and he lived next door but one. And he had an experience that same night, because I remember his mum coming and speaking to my mum and dad indirectly, saying, Hugh saw something really strange walking down Ferryboat Lane New Year's Eve, and they were talking about it. I'd love to contact him. My parents have passed away, but I want to know what this guy saw. He was a few years older than me. I don't know how old I was. He were old enough to go out and have a night out, but he was still only a young man. There's a chance he's still around. Just a crazy story. And thanks for throwing that one in, Chris. We are doing a new documentary as well, and we're calling it The Supraliminal, which means existing beyond the realms of consciousness. And it's a proper word.
Excellent.
Good for you.
We're gonna have you back whenever you guys get that out, definitely. Joanne, I want to thank you so much for what you do to help people. You know, just getting your hand in there, and on top of everything else that you do with the subject. But I think it's important that people like you are in this, helping people like Paul just work things out and sort things out. I can't imagine having to go through what you've gone through, Paul. I mean, I've seen the Sasquatch. It affected me bad enough. I can imagine having the things go on that are going on with you, Paul. And
it's a violation.
You guys can find Paul Sinclair. He's on YouTube. Paul Sinclair, Truth.
Yes.
I know. I just subscribed to it. And you can find the links to Joanne Summerscales and what she does, the ET Newsroom. You can find a link to that in the description. I want to thank both of you guys for coming on here with us tonight. It's been an excellent discussion, and love to have you back. Absolutely, for a regular researchers report, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Kerry.
Lovely.
Lovely to speak with you, Joanna.
Yeah, you too. And we must hook up again. We keep saying we will from July, but in the new year.
Yeah, we will. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. And when I get over to the States, Kerry, maybe we'll hook up as well. That'd be great.
Yeah, look me up. I'll definitely make time for you, Joanne. But Daniela, wonderful show as always. You do a fantastic job with this. Tomorrow night, we've got Shane Carpenter. We're going to be on 7:00 p.m. Central. Don't forget, check out the Paranormal Portal tonight at 9:00 p.m. Central, 7 Pacific. Those guys, it's going to be just Brent tonight. But they just do a great show over there every night. But thanks y'all for showing up here with us tonight. And y'all have a safe New Year's and holiday.
Yeah. Happy New Year to come, everybody. It's going to be interesting.
Right. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Thanks, Daniela. Bye. Bye.